Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to talk about my reading plans for the month of March. So if you follow along, you might know that I am going to be in Ireland and Scotland in the month of May. And there is an Irish Readathon in the month of March, and I am going to kind of do my own thing with that. So I'm kind of piggybacking off of the Irish Readathon, but doing my own thing with it. I'll have a link to the video from Words of Clover that sort of launches the Irish Readathon in the description box down below if you'd like to check that out. They have some challenges that they are going to do. I am sort of using this as an excuse to read a bunch of the books and authors that I had wanted to read before I go to Ireland. So that's kind of what I'm doing, but they have some challenges and which includes some cover prompts and things like that. I'm a bit too much of a mood reader to really follow prompts specifically. And again, since I'm using this as an excuse to read some books that I wanted to, it suits my purposes a little bit more to piggyback off of what they're doing. But if you are interested, their prompts are, there are 5 of them: to read a book with green on the cover, read an Irish children's book, read an Irish book that is related to the number 7, read an Irish book that fulfills one of the cover prompts, and read an Irish book that is in your favorite genre. And then the cover prompts are animal, food, house, books, people, trees, transport, fantasy element, and stars. So if you want more information about that, check the video down below, but that's kind of a quick overview of what they're doing. Let me tell you about the books that I am going to be reading. And there's a good mix of them. I'm pretty excited about all of these. I should note right off the bat, you will not see James Joyce on this list. That is rather deliberate. I talked about a bit of reluctance to read James Joyce in a previous video about some books that I will probably never read. I'll have a link to that down below if you'd like to know why James Joyce is not on this list. But I can feel people already wanting to comment and say, where's James Joyce? There's a reason he's not here. If you want to make a case for him, that's fine, but I am not going to prioritize him. I have a bunch of other things that I'm going to try to make happen before I go to Ireland. It's just the way it is. I have also read John Banville already. I think the one that won the Booker, which is called The Sea, I think. So I've read that already because that had been recommended to me, but I've already read that. So yeah, let's kind of jump in and start. I will also note before we get going that I will have affiliate links to all of these titles in the description box down below. Those are to bookshop.org. If you follow those links, it doesn't change the price of the book at all. It just gives a little bit of a kickback to me. I get a percentage of the sale. So you kind of help my channel out if you end up being interested in these. That's one thing that you can do if you'd like. Otherwise, you can order these from your local independent bookstore. That is always a great thing to do. I'm wearing a t-shirt from Boulder Bookstore in Colorado, which is a great store. I'm also wearing a flannel that is the closest shirt I have to matching the colors of the Irish flag. It's the closest I can get. You can also support your local library. If they don't have these books, just request them, because supporting your local library is also something that is always very good to do. Let's jump in. There are a good mix of titles and authors in here, some serious, some a little bit lighter. So I'm excited about all of these. The first one is very different from a lot of the other books that you will see on this list. It's Twisted, The Tangled History of Black Hair Culture by Emma Dabiri. I actually got this from my local library. And when I first talked about going to Ireland and Scotland, I'll try to put a link to that video down below as well. I think it was a Friday Reads, but that would actually be a good resource to you, that video, because a lot of people commented with great recommendations for Irish and Scottish reading. So if you are interested in this topic, you can look at the videos that the books that I have selected for my March TBR and my own version of the Irish Readathon. But you can also go to that video and read the comments and get a lot of other recommendations as well. In that video, I mentioned that I really wanted to read a book from an Irish or Scottish author of color, and Emma Dabiri was recommended by a couple of people. She's originally from Ireland. I believe she now lives in the UK and works for the BBC. There are 2 nonfiction books on here, and this is definitely a different spin, but it's a topic that I'm really interested in. So here is a quick blurb from the internet about this book. Deeply researched and powerfully resonant, Twisted proves that far from being only hair, Black hairstyling culture can be understood as an allegory for Black oppression and ultimately liberation. It sounds like a really interesting book. I was really pleased that my library had a copy. I didn't have to request it or anything like that. It's fairly short. It's under 300 pages, so I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be very different from the rest of the books that I'm going to be reading in the month of March, or that I've given myself as possibilities. I should have mentioned this before, but I will use this as an opportunity to mention that I think of TBRs, or pile of possibilities. I like the term pile of possibilities much better. I have way too many books than I will probably read in the month of March. I'm giving myself options, basically. I am a mood reader at heart, so having more books than I will read gives me the option of picking and choosing what I am currently in the mood for, and having a bit of a diverse array of books and stories, and like having a nonfiction book about Black hair culture is a perfect fit for this because it gives me a lot of options. So I will not be reading all of these books. I'm going to be picking and choosing from these books. I hope that makes sense. The next one is something that I have been trying to track down since I first talked about going to Ireland and Scotland, but I have not managed to get a copy of it yet. It's The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. Now, I do have a hold on this book at my library, but it's been like a week and it hasn't arrived yet. So I'm hoping that it will be coming soon, because this is a book that I would really like to read in the month of March. I'm very excited to read The Country Girls. Now, this is actually a trilogy. The Country Girls, I believe, is just the first in that trilogy of books. That it made Edna O'Brien famous. It was kind of controversial, for its depiction of young women and sexuality, I believe. So it just sounds perfectly in line with what I would like to do. I have already read one book for my Irish and Scottish authors, which was a memoir by Nuala O'Foylan, which talked about being a woman in a very changing Ireland. And The Country Girls is sort of a fictional representation of something vaguely similar to that. The description of it from online is: The Country Girls trilogy and epilogue charts unflinchingly the pattern of women's lives, from the high spirits of youth to the chill of middle age, from hope to despair, in remarkable prose, swinging from blunt and brutal to whimsical and lyrical. It is a saga both painful and hilarious, and remains one of the major accomplishments of Edna O'Brien's extraordinary career. So I will probably start with The Country Girls, and then once I finish The Country Girls, I don't know if I'll go on to the rest of the trilogy yet, because I have a lot of other books that I would like to get to. So I'm going to start with The Country Girls and just sort of see how things go. If I really like it and want to continue, I'll continue. But odds are I will probably read The Country Girls in March and then pivot to something else, and we'll just see how that goes. If for some reason my hold from the library does not come by the end of March, I do have an alternate Edna O'Brien book. I have a copy of The Little Red Chairs, and this is actually also available on audio. The only audio that I could find for The Country Girls is a BBC dramatization, and I don't think it's literally the text of the book. So I don't want to go that route. So if I can't get The Country Girls in print, I'm going to do The Little Red Chairs instead, and I have the option of doing it either in print or on audio, because I do have access to an audio. And if I end up doing this one, here is the description of it. Moving from Ireland to London and then to The Hague, The Little Red Chairs is a vivid and unflinching exploration of humanity's capacity for evil and artifice, as well as the bravest kind of love. Edna O'Brien is an author that I really want to read before I go. I'm hoping that it will be The Country Girls. If not, I have this in my back pocket as another option. And then a book that I know people are kind of waiting to see if I mention on this, although if you've looked at the description box, you know it's going to be featured in this video. I have been a little resistant to reading Milkman by Anna Burns, but I feel like this is a good place to do that. I've heard some mixed things about the print book versus the audio, but I think I would like to try the audio because I do have access to it. So this is a Booker Prize winner, and a lot of people recommended it to me and said that it would be a good book for me to read before I go to Ireland. So I am going to yield and say not James Joyce, but I will try Milkman by Anna Burns, and we'll see what happens. The blurb for that is: Milkman is a story of the way inaction can have enormous repercussions in a time when the wrong flag, wrong religion, or even a sunset can be subversive. Told with ferocious energy and sly, wicked humor, Milkman establishes Anna Burns as one of the most consequential voices of our day. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'm also giving myself the option of listening to Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt on audio because I have access to it. For a long time, I only had access to an abridged version of the audio, but the full-length version of the book is now available. And this is probably one of the most famous Irish books ever written, and it is nonfiction. This is the other nonfiction, and it is a memoir. Here is the, it's actually not a description of it. This is how the memoir opens, and I think that will give you a sense of why I have been interested in reading it. When I look back on my childhood, I wonder how I managed to survive at all. It was, of course, a miserable childhood. The happy childhood is hardly worth your while. Worse than the ordinary miserable childhood is the miserable Irish childhood, and worse yet is the miserable Irish Catholic childhood. So that would be a very interesting one, and I'm liking that I'm giving myself some print options and some audio options. Again, I feel like that gives me a good mix because that will help me fit in as many books as I possibly can into the month of March. Then we have another trilogy, and just like with The Country Girls, I am really going to focus on the first part of the trilogy. This is Roddy Doyle, and The Commitments is the one that I am going to focus on. This is the Barrytown trilogy. The second and third books are The Snapper and The Van, but I've heard so many good things about The Commitments. I've also heard good things about the movie adaptation, but I want to read the book before I even attempt to watch the film adaptation. I should also mention, I have already read Claire Keegan, so don't comment with that. I've read everything of hers that has been published in the US, almost. So I've already covered that base. Roddy Doyle has won a Booker, not for The Commitments. He won for Patty Clark, ha ha ha, I believe. But The Commitments is the work of his that is definitely most recommended to me, or recommended most often to me. Here is the description. I whittled this down to just The Commitments because, again, just like The Country Girls, I'm going to start with The Commitments, and then depending how much I like it or how things are going with the other books that I want to read, I may continue in the trilogy, but I'm much more likely to just stop there for now, at least, and get to some other books before I go. So, The Commitments, one of the funniest rock and roll novels ever written about a group of aspiring musicians on a mission to bring soul to Dublin. And I will be in Dublin while I'm in Ireland, so really looking forward to this. Again, I've heard just a lot of really good things about The Commitments over the years, so this is a good kick in the pants to finally get around to reading it. Now, I have a copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I have read Oscar Wilde before, but I've never read his novel. I've read plays, like The Importance of Being Earnest. So this is a good excuse to finally get around to this, but I'm thinking that I will probably want to do this on audio. The thing is, there are a lot of different audios available, so I'm going to ask you, what is the best audio of The Picture of Dorian Gray? Is there one that you would recommend? Because that is probably how I will end up reading this book, and I would like to read it before I go. If you're unfamiliar with this classic novel, entranced by the perfection of his recently painted portrait, the youthful Dorian Gray expresses a wish that the figure on the canvas could age and change in his place. When his wish comes true, the portrait becomes his hideous secret as he follows a downward trajectory of decadence and cruelty that leaves its traces only in the portrait's degraded image. Classic book. Again, I have this edition of it, but I'm much more likely to do it on audio. I feel like audio would be a fun way of doing this and capturing Oscar Wilde's famous wit. So if you have a recommendation for a narrator for the audio, let me know in the comment section down below. That is probably what I would do. Now, there is an author that I have been wanting to read for years, and my struggle has been trying to decide which of his books I will want to read first. And because I can't decide which one I want to read first, I haven't read him yet. That's Colm Tóibín. And the book I think I want to do is The Blackwater Lightship. This was a finalist for the Booker Prize and obviously didn't win since it was just a finalist. But it is really in line with a lot of the things that I find interesting in a book. It's an AIDS story. It is a queer story. And the description of it is this. The Blackwater Lightship is a deeply resonant story about 3 generations of an estranged family reuniting to mourn an untimely death. In spare, luminous prose, Colm Tóibín explores the nature of love and the complex emotions inside a family at war with itself. Hailed as a genuine work of art, this is a novel about the capacity of stories to heal the deepest wounds. It's not the book that most people recommend when they talk about this author, but it is the book that I am gravitating toward, so I'm giving it to myself as an option. Now, I only have the print version of this, so I'm giving myself an alternate Colm Tóibín book, and this is one of the books that is most often recommended. I think this is actually the book by him that is most recommended to me. I have a movie tie-in. I'm not a huge fan of movie tie-ins, but it is what it is. It's Brooklyn, which was adapted into a film, obviously, since this is a movie tie-in starring Saoirse Ronan, and there is a sequel to this book coming out later this year called Long Island. Now, I am actually originally from Long Island, so part of me also feels like I would like to catch up to this book. I did see the movie, but I don't remember it because I was with my mother, and she, this is so my mother, was offended by the portrayal of Italian immigrants, even though I don't think there was really anything offensive about the portrayal of Italian immigrants in the movie. It is what it is. She kept complaining about that, so I ended up disengaging from the movie completely. So I might as well have not seen it at all. So I would start with the book and then maybe rewatch the movie. I've just heard so many really good things about this. Essie from Montana Book Company is a huge fan of Brooklyn and is looking forward to the sequel. So maybe I would do this, but I feel like I want to do Blackwater Lightship, but this is a really solid backup, and I think I have access to the audio. I don't remember. If you're unfamiliar with what this book is, Eilish Lacey has come of age in small-town Ireland in the hard years following World War II. When an Irish priest from Brooklyn offers to sponsor Eilish in America, she decides she must go, leaving her fragile mother and her charismatic sister behind. Eilish finds work in a department store on Fulton Street, and when she least expects it, finds love. Tony, who loves the Dodgers and his big Italian family, slowly wins her over with patient charm. But just as Eilish begins to fall in love, devastating news from Ireland threatens the promise of her future. Heard really good things about it. This is an author that I really need to read at some point, so I have two good options from him for my pile of possibilities. Hopefully this will be the kick in the pants I need to get there. William Trevor is regarded as one of the best short story writers ever, and I know a lot of people are not big fans of short stories. I am a big fan of short stories, and I haven't read William Trevor, so this feels like a really great opportunity. I do have two other books from William Trevor on my shelf, so I do really have alternates, but I am so heavily prioritizing last stories that it doesn't even make sense for me to talk about the other two books as I would have, or as I did with Edna O'Brien or Colm Tóibín. This is the one that I really want to read. Here is the description of it. With a career that spanned more than half a century, William Trevor is regarded as one of the best writers of short stories in the English language. Now, in Last Stories, the master storyteller delivers 10 exquisitely rendered tales, 9 of which had never been published in book form, that illuminate the human condition and will surely linger in the reader's mind long after closing the book. So, I feel like this is a gimme. I really just want to read this book. And I do have access to the audio as well, so I could do this in print or I could do it on audio. It's nice to have options, and that is what I'm trying to do with this pile of possibilities for the month of March. I love to follow Parnassus Books on Instagram because it is owned by Ann Patchett, who is a writer, and she does a series where every Friday she talks about a book. If you haven't read it, then it's new to you. One of the books that she featured in one of those videos was This Is Happiness by Niall Williams. And she loved this book, and apparently when she took it off the shelf to talk about it, one of the other employees pointed at it and said, "Oh my God, that's my favorite book." So it just sounded really interesting. Now, this is another case where I have given myself wonderful options because I have the print book. And this is a bit of a chunky book. It's almost 400 pages, which is not too bad. But I do actually also have access to this on audio. So again, it's just nice to have options. I can do this in print, or I can do it on audio. Here is the description of this book. Niall Williams's latest novel is an intricately observed portrait of a community, its idiosyncrasies and its traditions, its paradoxes and its inanities, its failures and its triumphs. Luminous and otherworldly, and yet anchored with deep-running roots into the earthly and the everyday, This Is Happiness is about stories as the very stuff of life, the ways they make the texture and matter of our world, and the ways they write and rewrite us. probably one of the lesser known books on this list, or one of the lesser known authors, at least in the United States. But one of the ones that I am most looking forward to is This Is Happiness by Niall Williams. Now we get to Days Without End by Sebastian Barry. Now, before we even get to the description, I'm just going to say, this book is set in America. I know that. I'm aware of that. So maybe not the best representation of Ireland. However, it's characters who immigrated to the United States to get away from the famine in Ireland, which is actually what my family did. So my family started out in Scotland and had their land confiscated from them. So they ended up somewhere between Dublin and Belfast. My mother has done genealogy, but I couldn't remember where the town is. So they ended up there. And then when the famine hit, they ended up immigrating to the United States. So it's a facet of Ireland. And Sebastian Barry is a famous Irish writer, even though this book is set in the United States. So it's fine. It's fine. And he does have other books that are set in Ireland, but this is one that was very consistently recommended to me. And it is one that is very much in line with things that I am interested in reading. So that's why this one is here and not one that is, more quote unquote Irish. Here's the description of the book. Moving from the plains of Wyoming to Tennessee, Sebastian Barry's latest work is a masterpiece of atmosphere and language, an intensely poignant story of two men and the makeshift family they create with a young Sioux girl, Winona. Days Without End is a fresh and haunting portrait of the most fateful years in American history and is a novel never to be forgotten. So even though it really deals with America and American history, it is still an Irish story. It's still an Irish author, and it's an author that I would really like to read. So there's that. Then there's a book that I have access to on audio that was recommended to me a long time ago by a commenter, and I apologize. It was so long ago that I couldn't find the comment, and I don't remember what video it was on. It was just a long time ago. So the book is Strange Flowers by Donald Ryan. Now, I have access to this on audio. I actually purchased it on Libro a long time ago when it was first recommended to me, but I just haven't gotten around to it. So this is a great excuse to finally do that. Here's the description. In 1973, 20-year-old Moll Gladney takes a morning bus from her rural home in Ireland and disappears. Bewildered and distraught, Patty and Kit must confront an unbearable prospect that they will never see their daughter again. 5 years later, Moll returns from London. What and who she brings with her will change the course of the family's life forever. Beautiful and devastating, this exploration of loss, alienation, and the redemptive power of love reaffirms Donald Ryan as one of the most talented and empathetic writers at work today. I mean, it sounds really interesting, right? So I have access to this on audio, and I would love to get around to reading it. When I was reading Nuala O'Foylin's memoir about growing up and her career once she had become a writer and a journalist, she mentioned two writers, one of whom was female, and I didn't have access to any of her books. The other one was John McGahern, and they had this book, By the Lake, which is a novel of his, at my local used bookstore. He also has a memoir that I would have loved. He also has a story collection that I would have loved. This is what I had access to. So, it is what it is. And it actually does sound really good. And from the way Nuala O'Foylin talked about John McGahern in her memoir, really sounded like an author that I would like to read. Here is the description of this. With this magnificently assured new novel, John McGahern reminds us why he has been called the Irish Chekhov, as he guides readers into a village in rural Ireland and deftly, compassionately traces its natural rhythms and the inner lives of its people. So another one that I would really like to get to. And again, I'm not going to get to all of these books, but I really would like to get to as many of them as I possibly can. Now, for something different. In the Woods by Tana French. So I've never read Tana French, but she's obviously a very popular author. She is Irish. And I struggle a lot with more current mysteries and thrillers. I don't know when this one was published, though. It's not that recent, but it is recent. It's copyright 2007. So it does kind of fall into the area where I was starting to become disillusioned with current mystery and thrillers. But I've heard so many good things about this that I am going to give it to myself as an option. And I have the print version. I don't have access to the audio. So, we'll see I admit this is one that I would probably deprioritize. I would probably try to get to a lot of the other books on this list before. But if I need like a palate cleanser, if a mystery thriller starts to sound really appealing, I have it as an option. It is a bit of a chunky book. It is over 400 pages. Here's the description of it. As dusk approaches a small Dublin suburb in the summer of 1984, mothers begin to call their children home. But on this warm evening, 3 children do not return from the dark and silent woods. When the police arrive, they find only one of the children gripping a tree trunk in terror, wearing blood-filled sneakers and unable to recall a single detail of the previous hours. And then I believe from there, it jumps like 20 years into the future, and that kid is now a police officer. So, there you go. That's your mystery thriller element. So I'm giving myself this as an option. I do admit I would probably, if I were to choose, get to it a little bit later on in the list compared to the others. But it's nice to have options. That's what this is all about. So, and I have heard so many good things about Tana French that it feels like it would just be willful to ignore her completely. The final book that I'm including in my pile of possibilities for my version of the Irish Readathon is A Week in Winter by Maeve Binchy. And I do have access to the audio of this. This was in a video that I did a while ago about where I just did a Google search for what the best Irish novels are so I could see how many of them I have read. I will link that video down below. This was on that list. And when I started looking around, Maeve Binchy was an author who came up a lot with recommendations for Irish authors, and this, I believe, was published posthumously, but it is one that people point to a fair amount. So it seems like a good opportunity to try it. And the description will give away why I think it's a great option for myself, in giving myself a diverse array of options to read in the month of March. In a small town on the west coast of Ireland, an unlikely cast of characters come together at a newly opened inn. This delightful novel radiates the warmth and charm that fans will recognize and cherish. I mean, warmth and charm. If I end up reading some serious and heavy books during the month of March, I might need some warmth and charm. So it just seemed like a perfect palate cleanser. And definitely an author that a lot of people talk about, kind of similar to Tana French, although I admit I would feel like I would be more likely to try to fit in the Maeve Binchy. But we shall see. We shall see how many of these books I ultimately get to in the month of March. If you have thoughts about any of the books I've talked about and recommendations for which I should prioritize, maybe which ones I should deprioritize, if you want to make a case for a book that's not on this list, let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.